يا وجيه الدين والكرم.
The month of Dhul Qa'dah and the month of Dhul Hijjah is coming up. Now, the month of Dhul Hijjah, as the title suggests, is the month in which the Hajj is performed, and there are special blessings for the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. And those blessings have been highlighted in many hadith. The Prophet ﷺ used to place special emphasis on the days of Dhul Hijjah, increasing the takbir, the tahleel, the tasbih meaning subhanallah, tahleel, la ilaha illallah, takbir, Allahu Akbar, tahmeed, alhamdulillah, in these specific days of Dhul Hijjah. The Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned about these days. He said that no deed is better in these days, no other deed is better than those deeds which are done in these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. The Sahaba asked them, "Walal jihad fi sabilillah?" Not even jihad fi sabilillah, not even striving in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They knew what the virtue of striving in the path of Allah was, and that was huge. The virtue of striving in the path of Allah was huge. The Prophet ﷺ said, not even jihad fi sabilillah, except if a person goes out in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he basically loses everything. He spends everything, his life, his wealth, everything that he ever had. He spent it and he comes back with nothing. That person, maybe his deeds may be better, but otherwise the good deeds which are done on these 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, they are the most virtuous of deeds and they are most rewarding of deeds. So in these 10 days we should try to fast during the daytime. It will be of course nafil fast, and at night we should try to make qiyam and get up for tahajjud and make dua as much as possible. And especially the people who are going for Hajj, it is obviously a virtue for them, a special virtue that they're getting. They are going to be, these 10 days, they're going to be out in a very special situation, which is performing of an obligation on one of the 5 pillars of Islam. So they need to take that opportunity to make sure that they don't waste that opportunity and make sure that they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as much as possible in those days too. Now specifically, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah is the day of Arafah. And the Prophet ﷺ said about the day of Arafah, صوم يوم عرفة أحتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله والسنة التي بعده. That I hope that the fasting on the day of Arafah, which is the day before Eid, I hope that fasting on the day of Arafah, it will forgive the sins of 1 year before and the sins of 1 year afterwards. Okay, so that is such a rewarding thing that a person can do, is to be fasting on the day of Arafah, and that is basically, very, very simple to do. 1 day of fasting and yet so much reward. So we should try to make a point of doing that also. And during the days of Tashriq, which are the days of Tashriq, which are the day of Eid itself and 3 days after that, we need to increase the takbir as much as possible. Takbir al-Tashriq, which is Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Wallahu Akbar, wa lillahi alhamd. After all the salawat, and in general also, we need to try to do that, inshallah. Looks like the community have many questions, so let's try and tackle all of them, inshallah. What is the difference of reward for praying in the proper musalla, or masjid? I'm not sure what the specific motivation is behind this question, but the reward for praying in jama'ah is more than praying by yourself. The Prophet ﷺ said that a person who two people praying, it is better than 4 praying individually. 4 people praying, it is better than 8 praying individually. So the reward of praying in congregation, whether you are praying in the masjid or you're praying at home, it is more rewarding than praying alone. So much so that if a person, for example, he started his individual prayer, he started to pray fard prayer, and then he sees that a jama'ah is starting. He needs to break his prayer and he needs to join the jama'ah. When you go to the masjid itself, then that reward is multiplied 25 to 27 times more. So basically you can see that from two perspectives the reward increases. From the size of the jama'ah itself, the reward increases, that the bigger the jama'ah, the more rewarding it is. So from that perspective the reward increases. And secondly, what happens is that the reward is multiplied 25 to 27 times. So the question is that how many of you would, if you were told that you have to drive 5 minutes more than your current job and you'll get paid 25 times more than in your current place of work, would we not drive 5 minutes more, or 10 minutes more, or 15 minutes more, or 30 minutes more, just to get that extra 25 times more earnings? So the same thing applies to the jama'ah. We should never undermine it. We should never underestimate the reward. We should try to come and pray in the jama'ah as much as possible. And one side benefit of the jama'ah is something that a lot of people do not mention, and that is that when a person prays with the jama'ah, when he prays with the congregation, his mistakes that he may make individually, they are covered up with the barakah of the jama'ah. Okay, so if he misses something in salat, he's not aware of that he's making a mistake in salat. But because he's praying in the congregation, because of the barakah of that congregation, his reward of the salat will be complete, because the mistakes are basically covered up because of him praying behind an imam whose salat would be basically complete, hopefully inshallah, and his mistakes are basically brushed aside because of the fact that he's praying in jama'ah. So that is something also to keep in mind. Okay, what options do Muslims have for a 401k? Is getting IRA like Iman fund for purpose of 401k benefits recommended? Some scholars, it is allowed to invest in companies that have less than 3 or 5% interest income if it is a halal business. Basically, what you should try to do, as far as I know about 401ks, when you are given the option of a 401k, what happens is that they will give you certain categories that you can invest in. You can, for example, invest in health shares, you can invest in technology shares, and so on. So basically you should try to pick those batches of shares which are Islamically permissible, and obviously don't go for the banking sector, don't go for financials, don't go for entertainment industry. In fact, there are even Christian organizations that have mutual funds that are ethically and morally acceptable religious wise, and they only invest in them. I'm not sure what the names of those funds are, but they are available if you look for them. And amana funds, for example, if you go with them, usually they vet out all the companies and make sure that the companies that are invested in are halal. When away on travel, I am clear on combining salat. Question is, after coming back, say while on travel, Dhuhr and Asr time passes. When arriving home, can you combine Dhuhr and Asr? Yes, you can, because at the time of the Dhuhr coming in, you were traveling. Okay, and basically there is a difference of opinion about actually combining prayer or not in the first place. But in this day and age, I don't think that, and specifically because of the difficulties that Muslims have while traveling, it would be permissible for a person to combine the prayer. And in this case, when coming back, you are actually a musafir all the way until you actually enter into the boundary of your hometown. Okay, so even if you are outside your hometown and you wanted to pray in qasr, you're allowed to do that. Okay, so but as soon as you enter the boundary of your hometown, then you would basically pray the full prayer of the time of the salat. Say for example, it's still Asr time when you get back into your hometown, so you would have to pray your Asr time, Asr full, and Dhuhr you can actually shorten it, because while you were traveling, that Dhuhr was obligatory upon you. while you're traveling, it was obligatory upon you then, so you can shorten it. That is the way that you would pray that. Do you have any tips in terms of establishing khushu' in salat? Obviously this is something that we all should try to strive for as much as possible. Khushu' means concentration, devotion, and the best way really is to go through the whole procedure of salat. Salat is not just that you come and stand and pray. There is actually a procedure for it, and that is take time out for salat, make wudu, and while making wudu, think about the hadith which mentions that the sins of a person when he's making wudu, they're being extinguished, and then come and pray, come and sit in the masjid, pray the 2 rak'ah if it's not makruh time, sit and concentrate on dhikr, reciting Quran, and focusing on what you're about to do. Just think about and compare yourself to what you are doing if you have a job interview. All right, you have a job interview and you're sitting in the waiting room of that job interview. This job interview is a make or break interview. If you get this job, then basically you're set for life. If you don't get this job, then basically you're going to be stuck in a rut for the rest of your life in the same job that you don't like doing. So when you are sitting in that waiting room, how's your mindset? You're going through all of the questions that person could be asking you, all of the qualifications that you've done, all of the things that could come up in the interview. You're basically going through them. So when you are sitting for salat, you are going to be presenting yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Think of maybe the sins that I've been committing all day, and the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I've been doing, and how I should present myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how humble I should be in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I am about to stand in front of. And finally, one of the best ways of thinking about the khushu' in salat is to actually think that this could be my last salat ever. If a person thinks that this is going to be my last salat, and after this the angel of death is going to take my ruh away, then obviously he's going to have so much focus, so much concentration and devotion that he basically is, this is his last opportunity to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's going to have that concentration. So these things we should try to keep them in mind while praying the salat. Praying salat at a musalla versus in a masjid, what is the difference in reward? Somebody asked me the same question. 2 people asked the same question. But it's 2 different people. So the congregational masjid is more rewarding than a musalla. Okay? But like I said, any place in which a congregational prayer takes place, it is more rewarding than praying at home. And if that musalla is closer to you and it's more convenient to you and you're more likely to get to it, then go to the musalla. But if the masjid is closer to you, then obviously that is more rewarding and you should try to pray there, inshallah. Sometimes our neighbors invite us for Christmas parties, dinners. Is there any reason why we should accept or reject the invitation? What is your advice? The issue is that Christmas is, it is a purely religious celebration, and keeping that point in mind, we should not be celebrating it, and nor should we be participating in that in the celebration of Christmas per se. And if you really think about it from a Christian perspective, how many people actually think about Christmas as a religious celebration anyway? Rather, people take it as an opportunity to have parties, to engage in illicit relationships, to get drunk, to basically do all kinds of unreligious things which are not connected with any type of religion whatsoever. And of course, the whole issue of materialism. Christmas is all about materialism. Buying presents for each other, making sure that you have gifts for everybody. Why is Black Friday called Black Friday? Does anybody know? Why is Black Friday called Black Friday? Does anybody know? Huh? Yes. Because traditionally, all through the year what happens is that all the companies the Walmarts, the Best Buys, whatever company you can take, they are all operating at deficits. They're not really making a profit. They are all operating in the red. On Black Friday, that is such a crazy shopping day that everybody is trying to shop for Christmas, that is when basically the balance shifts from red to black, and that's when they start making the profit. So Christmas time, starting from after Thanksgiving up to Christmas time, is when the retailers make the profit. So it's more materialism than anything else. And then all the symbols related to Christmas, they're all pagan symbols. The Christmas tree, Father Christmas, the Yuletide log. I mean, I don't think you have the Yuletide. It's more famous in Europe, the Yuletide and things of that nature. The holly, the holly and the ivy, the mistletoe, all these things, you look them up online, you will find that they have pagan roots. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, Jesus was probably not even born on December 25th. December 25th was a celebration that the ancient Romans used to have, which celebrated the winter solstice, which is related to the birth of the sun god or something of that nature. Okay, it's again a pagan festival, which was December 25th. Jesus was probably born around April, according to all historians. Okay, so it has no religious significance according to them, and we as Muslims should not be participating in something that even hints at religious symbolism, and because of all the pagan things associated with, we should not. In fact, it's very easy to tell the people that we very respectfully that we don't celebrate Christmas because we're not Christians, but we'd love to come at any other time of the year. If you invite us, we'd love to come. So that's the way to get out of it, inshallah. From the Islamic point of view, is it prohibited to donate to poor non-Muslims? Actually, there are 8 categories of zakat. And one of those categories is called mu'allafatul qulub. Mu'allafatul qulub means that those people that if you were to donate to them, then they would find an interest in Islam. They would become attracted to Islam. Now, whether that category is still applicable in today's world or not, that is open to question. It is there's a difference of opinion, because in the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, they decided that mu'allafatul qulub was no longer a category that should be entertained, because Islam was at a peak at that time and Islam was victorious. That's why that became cancelled out. My personal opinion is, in this day and age, when Islam is being maligned on so many different fronts, and Islam is being blamed on so many fronts, we should take every opportunity to try to attract people to Islam and tell them and teach them that this is what Islam teaches, to help the poor, to help the needy. And in doing so, to give to the non-Muslims, I think it would be perfectly permissible. Can we donate to a scholarship fund established in the name of a non-Muslim person? The scholarship benefits to all regardless of race or religion. It depends really on who that person was. Generally speaking, what happens is whenever somebody starts a scholarship fund, it is to elevate that person's name and keep that person's name in respect of what he did. Okay, so for example, there are even families who, just because they were rich, they made all of these funds, and they may not necessarily have been the most ethical of people. I don't want to name any names because it wouldn't be appropriate. So my suggestion would be for Muslims to start their own scholarship funds using the names of Sahaba, for example. Umar ibn al-Khattab fund, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq fund, Ali ibn Abi Talib fund. And some people have already actually started that. So we should try something like that. whether it's permissible to do that or not, it's really, again, dependent upon who the scholarship's name was under, okay, the fund's name was under. During sujood, I want to collapse my elbows towards myself during prayer in Jama'ah. However, I want to know if my prayer will be still valid. This is because there is less room for me to extend my wings in the Jama'ah. The wings. Okay. If you're alone during sajda, if you're not in congregation, then the proper procedure would be to have your elbows up and off the floor and away from your body. That's the proper procedure. Your elbows should not be close to you when you're alone. However, in Jama'ah, what happens is, because you're squashed up and sometimes you're in a tight position, so if because of that tightness your elbows are touching your body, that's perfectly okay. But if you're alone, then the elbows should be up off the floor and away from your body. If my cell phone rings during the prayer, am I allowed to turn off the phone? My prayer will be still valid? Yes, absolutely, you're allowed to turn off the phone. If your salat, if it goes off in the salat, you should actually turn it off in the first place. The ruling behind this is something which is known as amal kathir in salat. What is amal kathir? Amal kathir, there are two opinions as to what amal kathir is. One opinion is that if you do something which is not part of the salat more than 3 times in the salat, then your salat is invalid. Okay, so that is something that we need to pay attention to. Okay, many times we're scratching ourselves, playing with our clothes. If you do that more than 3 times, according to some scholars, your salat is invalid. So really you should be completely perfectly still and focusing only and only on the salat. Now your cell phone rings, basically you put your hand in your pocket, turn it off. That is just one action that you did and it's finished. So your salat will still be valid. But if it was one of a number of actions that you've been doing all through the salat, then obviously your salat would be under question. The second opinion about amal kathir is that if somebody was to look at you and think by your actions that the actions that you're doing, that you're not praying salat, your salat would be invalid. And sometimes you do that. You sometimes see somebody and messing around with the clothes so much and looking everywhere, you cannot really think that that person is in salat. And if that's the case, then the salat would be certainly at least questionable. Can Muslims eat in idol worshippers' house or restaurant where they have their idols displayed? As long as the food has not been blessed on the idols, it would be okay. It would be permissible to do that. Okay, there are a few text messages I got. Okay, if someone is not married, is he going to have a wife in Jannah? Inshallah, he should have a wife in Jannah, unless he doesn't want it. Unless he doesn't want a wife in Jannah. Why would he not be married in this world anyway? That's the question. Another comment rather than a question. Could you please kindly remind our brothers to wash, I think it says smile nice, but I think it's smell nice before they come to the masjid. Some brothers smell awful. It says smile awful, but I think it's smell awful. So again, if you come to the masjid, I've mentioned that many times before, part of our hygiene is to make sure that we are not harming anybody. That's why the Prophet ﷺ, he used to tell people not to eat onion, garlic and leek before coming to the masjid. Okay, all of these foods are strong smelling foods, and in our Desi culture, Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, all that spicy food, it really, if you do not brush your teeth, is going to make your breath smell. So please, after eating that, go to the washroom, use some mouthwash, brush your teeth, do some flossing before coming to the masjid, so that you're not harming anybody by coming to the masjid in that situation. Yes, same thing for cigarette smokers. Okay, one question here is, if you have a home loan, okay, if you have a home mortgage loan, how do you consider the debt for calculation of zakat? It's a good question and a very relevant question which comes up from time to time, and this is also related to the issue of Hajj. Okay, probably most of us, we all have loans, whether through Islamic financing or conventional financing, that we use to purchase homes with. Okay, now in a traditional sense, if a person is in debt and that debt is more than the money that he has, then he would not have to pay zakat on that. And also he would not have to go for Hajj if his savings are less than the debt that he owes. But the problem is that in this country, most of us, like I said, we are in that debt. So because of that particular situation, if we were to use that traditional equation, then nobody would pay zakat and nobody would go for Hajj. And that's pretty, straightforward. Nobody would pay zakat, nobody would go for Hajj. So in the case of these home mortgages, we have to basically sideline them, not regard them as debt, and the savings, we pay zakat on them, and we perform Hajj with those savings if they accumulate to a degree that Hajj would be obligatory, which would be if you have enough money to go there and come back and leave enough money for your family, then that Hajj is obligatory upon you. So for both Hajj and zakat, mortgage loans should be put to the side. And of course, if a person, he's got this debt and every paycheck, he's living paycheck to paycheck, he basically takes all that money and pays off the debt. And by the end of the month, he has nothing left. So obviously, he's not going to have to pay zakat because he doesn't have any money left, and also he's not going to have to perform Hajj because he doesn't have enough savings to take him for Hajj. So that will be the situation. What advice can you give if I am going to buy a house? Basically, how can I finance a house Islamically in America? These Islamic financing companies, they are the way to go. That's one way to do it. Or you do what's called owner financing. Sometimes what happens, an owner who's paid off his house, he can give you, for example, if he is selling his house for $100,000, you can tell him, look, I'll pay you over 15 years and I'll give you $120,000 over these 15 years. So if he agrees to that, then that's perfectly permissible for you to do. That's owner financing. Or like I said, go through these Islamic companies. Many people have this question, well, ultimately it boils down to the same thing. It boils down to the same thing. What La Riba does or what guidance does is exactly what the conventional banks do. That's not actually accurate. They do, La Riba and guidance, they do use the bank rates as a benchmark to make their calculations. That's correct. But the transaction is different. And now let me give you another example to make you understand that. That if, for example, you earn $100 by selling something haram, okay? You've got $100 in your hand. And you sell something else which is halal and you have $100 in your hand. At the end of the day, you have $100 here, $100 here, and you think, well, it's the same thing. I got $100. Okay? That's the calculation that some people have. They say, well, ultimately, you're paying the same amount of money to La Riba or guidance that you would in a conventional mortgage. Okay? So that doesn't make it haram. It's the transaction, the contract that you have with the company that makes something halal or haram. Okay, so what happens in these cases of La Riba and guidance, you have a shared ownership program where both of you become owners of the property, and then you buy out your share of the ownership by paying partly rent and you pay partly the principal or the money that they loaned you in the first place. They make their profit with the additional rent that you pay. Okay, so you should not think that just because you are paying the same amount of money that it becomes impermissible for you, and it works out the same. Another question that people have, well, they use the same forms. Legally, they are obligated to do that. There is no choice for them. There are federal rules and guidelines that they have to use specific forms, they have to use specific terminology, they have to use specific wording when you are filling out the form to apply for the loan, and that's why you have to use the same forms and they use the same terminology. Okay? And that's because they are federally mandated to do so, and they have no other choice to do that. Okay? So if you go with them, that is permissible. There's another. That's a good question. The question is, if you didn't hear him, is that they get their money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and then they basically turn around and give you a loan. That's not exactly how it works. And I clarified this with these brothers. This rumor, if you like, or this understanding that people have, that they get money from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and then they turn around and loan it at a higher quote-unquote interest rate. That's not exactly how it works. This is how they do it. Let's step aside from banks for a minute and think about, say for example, there are 2 or 3 brothers, they want to invest in a business, okay? And they don't have the capital to invest in the business, but they say they talk to what's called venture capitalists who can provide the capital for that money. And that person looks at the business model and he says, okay, I can see that you are going to make 5% profit every month from my investment, so I'm going to invest in this business model of yours. That is perfectly permissible, that a venture capitalist takes the money and puts it into this business of yours. Okay? So what Lariba does, and specifically I asked Lariba about this, Lariba does, what they say is that, okay, this is a transaction that we're going to have with such and such a person, and with the money that we see that we're going to make approximately a 5% profit over the 15 years that we are doing this transaction. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, would you like to invest in this as an investor? So as investors, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they come in, just like any other individual could come in and invest in that transaction and make an estimated 5% profit according to their claims. Okay? So it's not that they are getting the money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and then lending the money out that way. It is basically they are presenting a scenario where this situation, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, is going to net you approximately 5% profit. Would you like to invest in it? And they invest in it, and they are basically investors in that transaction, not people that are just giving money and that money is then loaned out to other people. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay, I think I got some more questions. Okay, we have a few questions which are a little bit more deep, and ironically they're from converts to Islam. I'm not going to discuss them, I'm just going to read the questions to you. What's the best way to counter attacks in day-to-day interactions? Meaning, if somebody is attacking Islam, how do you respond back to that? Because let's face it, we cannot all recite your book. They're referring to me. And another convert sister is saying, our leaders in the Masjid seem to be struggling. Why? So that's again something that we need to reflect upon and work upon, why our leadership is struggling. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us. We'll stop there now.